Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Welcome back, everybody. Sorry we're a little behind tonight, but that's okay. It'll be well worth your time waiting. It is Thursday night. It is the Devy Hour, and although it is April Fool's, we're not going to play much fooling around tonight. We're going back to Devy. We've been hitting the rookies hot and heavy for the NFL draft, and we're going to go back a little bit. We're going to go back to the actual name of the show and talk about what you guys actually would assume this show is about, which is Devy Fantasy Football. Tonight we're going to talk about guys that we're interested in, maybe some names that we're higher on, maybe some names we're looking to target, things like that. So it's going to be a fun night. We're going to give you some names to think about. You know, as spring ball gets under the way, as these kids are getting back and getting ready for late summer, early fall. You know, we want to give you some names to keep an eye on. So tonight will be a good one for you. As always, if you have questions, make sure you throw them in the chats. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, do all the things you do on YouTube to show YouTube how much you love everything the RotoHeat team's doing here. As always, rookiedraftguide.com, rotoheat.com. I actually just dropped a Devy quarterbacks article focused on guys that could potentially be 2022 quarterback prospects for the NFL draft that you may want to think about. So head over there, check it out. With that being said, I am joined by my usual suspect, Paul Veldman. How are you tonight, sir?
Yeah, work week's been fine, actually. It hasn't been a gigantic pain. I'm looking forward to the weekend here. It's actually not awful up here in the Midwest, and hanging out with friends this weekend, hitting up a card show so I can stupidly spend money like I, have been for the last year and buy stuff I don't need. Um, I know you're going to have a fun week. There's a reason that we're not going to be here next
I
week.
am ready to go. Work was insane today. We had a lot of what I do in my day-to-day job is project management and WordPress website overlord, I guess. I don't know. I do a lot of stuff with WordPress sites at my job, and we had somebody trying to hijack. So I was spending my day fighting off the nefarious criminals hiding in the deeper regions of the internet. So that was not a great way to end the work week, but I'm glad it's over with, and I'm ready for vacation. I'm ready to go down to Florida, put my feet in the sand, and I've loaded up plenty of books to read, and I'm just going to kick back, relax, and try to enjoy myself. So I'm ready to roll.
I'm not going to hide it. That was me hijacking
Was
your
that you?
site.
You're the nefarious, seedy underbelly of the internet. Yeah,
Just for fun.
I could see that. I
Just
could
for
see
fun.
that. So, with that being said, we're going to talk about Devy guys. Let's start with some guys that we're interested in. Maybe guys that we're big fans of heading into the season. Um, I'm not putting a cap on it, so it can be anybody from a freshman to a guy who could be in the draft next year. I've kind of targeted guys that are going to be looking towards the draft in the next year or two potentially, but that doesn't mean you have to. So, Paul, I'll let you start. Give me your guy. Let me know what you like about him, and sell me on him.
Yeah. I love that we don't have a script for this show. It's great. Um, I'll go with Sam Howell. If you're playing Superflex, he's the 1-1 in every Superflex Devy mock right now, or actual if you have a full slate. Um, I I know that there are some that are high on Rattler, but Howell he's almost like the Trevor Lawrence in the actual draft. If you're high on Wilson or Fields or whoever, you're still going to sell the 1-1 to somebody who wants Howell because he's more consensus for as much as you can have a consensus for Devy players, but he's basically Baker Mayfield. Um, you do have some decisions that are, what were you thinking on it? But he's got the arm, and he should. I think the odds that he goes in the first round next year, and again, we're gonna do at least for a Devy show, we're gonna try to be as general here as we are able to, looking out a year. it's a lot easier when you're looking out a month or a week or the draft happened and where should you select them after. No, it's back at we're drafting them a year out, 2 years out, 4 years out, whatever it is. I think the odds he goes in the first round are like 85%. Um, how do you feel
Yeah,
about Sam
yeah, he
Howell?
was actually tops on my list in my article I posted this morning. He's had 2 years at UNC, and you've continued to see him get smarter with the football. I've seen a lot of people do the Baker Mayfield comp, which I'm fine with. I know people are some are hot and cold on Baker, but Baker is a solid pro. From the fantasy side, he is a very viable fantasy asset. The thing I like about Howell is that he does a good job of making something out of nothing. When the pocket breaks down, because UNC is not exactly known for offensive linemen, he has to do a lot of improv when it comes to what he's doing with the ball. So I think he's an exciting player to watch. I think he's got a plus arm. I think he's got really solid mobility. He reminds me when it comes to his ability to make things out of nothing, and you look at an NFL prospect, I think like Kyler Murray, but not as speedy. Kyler Murray is a much faster quarterback, but Howell does a lot of those same things where he's just changing his base and his stance and his location, and he just drops the ball on a dime. So I'm excited about him. I think he's a really solid prospect. But if I'm looking to target him and he's already on a roster, you're paying the premium. And right now it's a tough time to buy a guy like that because you are paying such a high price for him. So he is arguably the top quarterback in college, at least right now at this point. But there's also a lot of guys that people are down on. I mean, you think of the bigger names. Some are down on Rattler, some are down on Slovis. Some of the guys from my article, like Tyler Show, transferred. JT Daniels transferred. Jaden Daniels at Arizona State. You just didn't get a lot of sample size of these guys that were higher prospects coming into college. So I think Howell's the safest guy you can get right now, but he's also the most expensive.
Yeah, he's the most known. Um, Rattler looked horrible the first. I mean, and this is a general statement, but the first month of the season, and then it's as if he figured it out somewhat. He's still more of an athlete than refined thrower, but I think the odds that he goes in the first round next year, or if he gets an ACL like Pickens, and when that eventually happens, I think the odds that Rattler ultimately makes the first round are like 70% and Shower 60.
I love.
So
I mean, I wrote about him in my article, but I like Shao a lot. I think Texas Tech will be really interesting to see. He came in and was okay at Oregon. Big kid. I think they expected it to be Herbert 2.0. 6'5", 225-ish, big arm. I mean, really very similar type player. But I'm excited to see him in Texas Tech, because there's such a wide open spread offense, and the way that the NFL plays nowadays. I think it'll be interesting to see if they can speed up his decision making, his accuracy, his moving around in the pocket, the pocket manipulation, if you will. I mean, like, I'm excited to see if they can really just speed up everything with him. I think he could really solidify himself as a first round type prospect, especially in a potentially weaker class.
yeah, yeah, I thought that Shao had a high number of Oregon's system touchdowns there, and it'll be interesting to see him somewhere else. I like him. I don't love him, but if he ends up being first overall, a lot can change in
Oh,
1 year.
absolutely.
Who knows? The first overall might not even be on our list or next week's or next month's list. I mean,
No,
who
it's
knows?
it's such and that's the great and the terrifying thing about Devi is, you know, you could really rinse and repeat every year because you never know who the top guy is going to be when it's all said and done. So you're kind of going, well, these are the guys I like. I'm going to take a shot at them. But everybody in the league could be not sitting on that top guy. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, obviously, everybody kind of expected it. Sam Howell is kind of in a very similar mold, like you said earlier. But that could change very quickly because there's a lot of uncertainty, especially from 2021 on. A guy like George Pickens.
Yeah,
I love George Pickens. He's a guy that I want to target right now because I'm hoping you can get him cheaper because he's hurt. And if you can get him for cheap because he's hurt, I'm all over that. I mean, because it's just an ACL. He'll recover just
yeah,
fine.
yeah. He's basically AJ Green in that he's not super refined, but he's refined enough with that height, weight, speed to look out. He can just out athlete most of the league, assuming that he doesn't completely fall off from the injury.
I think he's at a good school to be able to bounce back just fine. The staff there will do everything they can to get that kid ready to go. So uh, I think they'll be perfectly fine, and I'm excited for Pickens. I think he will be perfectly fine. ACLs aren't what they used to be. They're easy to replace and easy to fix. It seems like so.
It'll be interesting in seeing the odds if he declares without having
Ooh,
film this year.
that'll be a tough one. He will. I think he would slip. Uh, I wouldn't say considerably, but think Justin Ross. I mean, Justin Ross. You weren't sure if he was going to play ball again. Now he's going back to Clemson.
Well, that was a
Right.
neck issue though, and you got legitimate concerns about one wrong hit. You have the hey, is your ACL normal with every player? I mean, you kind of have that concern. It'll be interesting to see if he declares. I'm not saying he should or he shouldn't. It's his family and his life and whatever. I'm just throwing it out there. It'll be
Yeah,
interesting.
I would be nervous if I was coming out off of not playing for an entire year because of injury. Like, it's almost like we were talking about with Dylan Moses last year. Go back, play, show everybody you're good to go, get your draft stock up. I mean, it didn't. It may or may not happen that way for Moses. I don't know that he really showed enough last year to really improve his draft stock, but at least he showed that he was healthy. That isn't really the concern for him now.
Yeah.
So yeah, Pickens would definitely be a guy I would target if you're looking, if you can get him cheap. I mean, same with who was the other guy at Georgia because they had two wide receivers get hurt. I can't think of the other guy's name off the top of my head.
The speed guy who transferred.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, the
yeah.
freshman.
I can't think of his name. I
Oh,
would go after him too, see if he's available. But off the top of my head now, I can't think of his name. So people are gonna go, well, how can I target him if I don't know his name?
he's the yeah. Open up another tab. Google freshman who tore his ACL to Georgia. Like he was looking solid, not like obvious talent solid, but enough that you can show on freshman snaps. And then he tore his ACL in November, December, whenever they stopped playing football 3 weeks of the year last year because they started late.
Zamir White, George
I
Pickens. Zamir White,
don't.
George Pickens. That's not who I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's not
Jermaine
Zamir
Burton.
White. Yeah, this is
Is that his name? Burton? Yep,
Georgia wide receiver
Jermaine
torn
Burton.
ACL.
Star wide receiver George Pickens suffered ACL and missed 2021.
Blaylock. Dominic Blaylock
Oh
was
yeah,
another
well
one
he was hurt.
also.
Wasn't he hurt before this? Yeah, on Tuesday, sophomore receiver Jermaine Burton, who was expected to receive a bulk of passes, was carted off the field with a knee injury of his own. So there's
Yeah. Blaylock was interesting also, but he suffered a
yes,
second
yep.
one. I thought he had more athletic upside, and now it's second ACL. And as much as I like Zamir White there also, it's a concern. It has
Yeah.
to be a concern.
But these are perfect guys to target if you can get them on the cheap, stash them, see what happens.
Yeah.
Because most of these are all ACL issues, you can bounce back and be productive. We see it all the time. I mean, obviously Blaylock having multiples, there's a little bit more of a concern there, but that should be a much cheaper get than George Pickens. Burton, I don't know that Burton would have been rostered a whole lot, but I know that people were getting excited about it before he got hurt. And I would even throw Justin Ross into the mix. I mean, you can get him, I'm sure, for a very inexpensive price. And he's coming back. He's going to play with DJ Ukulele, you know, that guy, the new starting quarterback in Clemson. So he could look very, very draftable. And before the neck injury, people were talking about him as, wide receiver one in the class. Now, obviously, Jamar Chase and some of these other guys
Yep.
were, are there now. But um,
Yeah, I thought he was top 10 overall before the injury. So, I mean, he's got elite upside if it can work out. And if there's a situation, I mean, Mike Williams, he cracked his neck on the goal post and still went
and he's
seventh
still playing.
overall. If you're saying he hasn't worked out in the NFL, that's
Well,
a
yeah, it's a much
different
different
argument.
conversation. He's been available. He has had injuries, but it's not been the neck. It's been other stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't. I really, outside of concussion injuries, I don't necessarily let the injury front worry me a ton if I'm trying to get a guy with that has elite type upside for a cheaper price. Like if I can get him for a value, I'll take a shot. In fantasy, I like to swing for the fences. Sometimes I miss it.
Speaking about swinging for upside and Clemson receiver and just cheap, Frank Ladson is someone who everyone seems like they switched
Joe
over
Nada.
to. Yeah, Nada and Ladson. I think has more of an upside than he does, and he is 5% of the price.
Yeah, I mean, I like them both,
I
but whoever you can get cheaper, I'd go after.
Yeah, I mean it's not that I don't like Nada, just everyone like they look at the stats and go, okay, well this guy showed it more. Well, I mean, I want to look at football this last year and just go, all right, well everyone gets a mulligan because if you watch the Pac-12, as much as I didn't like Slovis before the season, and I'm still not a fan. They played what 6 game regular season.
Yeah,
Ouch! It's hard to get you know it's hard to get much headway there.
it's tough. There's just I don't blame, and I try not to put it on any of the players. I mean, because everything was different. Training, how they prepared for games. I mean, all of it was just so all over the place that I'm really not going to hold it against somebody who I had interest in before last year if he didn't have a great year. And even guys that, I mean, like you said with Slovis, I'm not the hugest Slovis fan, but I'm at least intrigued at the right price to sit on him and see what happens because, he is a guy that people had a pretty high opinion of coming into the season, and the season didn't go well. So um, I would take a shot at him if the price was right, especially in a superflex type league. I'm
Emory is another one who fits that also. Just elite upside, but it didn't show
Oh
because
yeah, they're
LSU was
bad. Yeah.
terrible. LSU decided that they wanted 8 running backs seeing snaps. It doesn't matter who runs the show, whether it's Saban, Grass Eater, Eder, or doesn't matter who runs the show. They're going to run 8,000 running backs on the field, and none of them see
Yeah,
any
John
snaps
Emery
because of
Jr.
it.
is a nice
But
piece. He's a good back. Uh, and speaking of backs, I
yeah,
want to throw a couple out that are smaller school running backs that I've kind of tried to keep tabs on. Um, Jarrett Patterson's a back in this draft that I like a lot, actually in the NFL draft from Buffalo. But his running mate, Kevin Marks Jr., bigger. I think he's a little bit more physical, probably just as athletic, and he's over at Buffalo as well. I would be intrigued to try to get some shares of him because I'm sure nobody's rostering him. But I like him a lot. I like his size. I like his speed. I like that he can do a little bit of everything. Now because he was running neck and neck with Patterson, they shared a lot of both rushing attempts and stuff out of the backfield receptions wise. So when you look at the numbers for Marks, you don't see a ton of receptions, but when you watch the player, um, I don't see any problems with him catching. I'm interested in getting a couple of shares of him just to kind of see what happens. If I'm in a deeper Devy league, I know that he's considered probably the one of the top backs in the conference as it stands today. Um, I'm I like Patterson a lot, so that's probably why I might be a little biased towards Marks because I watched a lot of Patterson's tape, and when I watched him, I was just as excited for Marks as I was for Patterson. He is doing the same thing as Patterson. I mean, he's just crushing people. Averaging over 6 yards a carry last year, averaging around 5 yards per carry before that. I mean, like we've talked about plenty of times, smaller school guys, you want to see him dominate. He dominates when given an opportunity. So him as well as the kid from Colorado, Jarrett Broussard. Those are a couple of names of guys that I'm interested in taking flyers on later in my Devy drafts this year just to see how things go for them. My concern is they're coming from schools that don't always produce a lot of NFL talent, but I like the players' talent enough that they might get something out of it. So those are a couple names of running backs that I'm interested in kind of taking a flyer on. I tried to, as I was prepping for the show, I tried to look for guys that are maybe under the radar but have done enough that have shown enough on tape in college to make me think, you know what, maybe they'll get a chance at the next level, especially with the next few years worth of draft classes. I've not seen I don't think any of them are truly stacked at the running back position, so I tried to look a little deeper about who might be guys that might fly under the radar. So those are a couple guys that I'm really interested in. I've been keeping tabs on, and I like them quite a bit. Also, the kid from Minnesota, but I mentioned that on the show even during the fall, Mohamed Ibrahim. He showed off this year, though, so he's not as nearly under the radar, especially in the Big Ten.
It'll be interesting at the running back position in seeing Trayvon Henderson. It'll be interesting, the true freshman, in seeing everyone likes Henderson, almost like everyone liked Bijan last year. The issue is going to be how much do you love him? He's from Hopewell, about 2 hours from DC, and that's in a vehicle. I think if he ran there or if he got a sniper rifle, he might get there faster. And there's your one per show, everybody. There's your one per
Oh
show.
boy, there it is. We can't get that back.
You get one. You get one. But yeah, I really like him. It's going to be interesting to see how high he goes because the speed and the overall athlete in him is just, it is elite. How it works out against, college level defenders, yeah, there's a lot of them, but he just looks different than the
Yeah,
other freshmen.
yeah. I like him. I like the player a lot. I wish he went to a better school, but that's just personal preference. Maybe because I hate the school he went to. I don't hate that pick at all. I think Henderson's a really intriguing player. I don't know that people are. I think people are all still pretty high on him. I mean, at least a little bit that I've heard people talk about him. But that's the other side of Devy that's interesting to me is uh, trying to understand. Devy is a much harder thing to gauge people's values on players because it's so wide open that not only the knowledge base, but the skill level, the depth of understanding at the college level. I mean, it's Devy's a much more interesting platform to try to figure out and make trades with, you know. And a guy like Henderson, I think, would be a nice to have on your roster, but I just don't know what people are going to ask for him.
Risk tolerance is an issue with him. I remember sitting there with a friend of mine, and we had NBA Live 03 on, and nuts that LeBron is going in the first round of a franchise mode, and I sat there and thought about it, and I went, well, it's risk tolerance. Trayvon Henderson is going to go non-super flex, late first, early second, without ever seeing a snap on the field. Risk tolerance. and how much of it can you stomach?
Right.
Because the upside's obvious, but downside is he's never seen a field, and if he Zamir whites it, gets hurt twice, whoops,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, for sure.
risk tolerance is all it is.
Yeah. All right, so over in the chat, Sean wants to know, I'm in a 12-team half-point PPR single QB full IDP dynasty. I have the 101, 108, and 201 in the rookie draft. Team is a little rebuild and the best player available situation. Who do you take? So,
I'm sorry, what's the picks?
101, 108, 201.
On Superflex,
Yeah, it's one QB, but it's full half-point PPR, full IDP.
full ADP, huh?
And remember, we are
Um,
pre-draft still, so this could slightly change a little bit in a month.
I would take one of Chase or Pitts number one, depending on what your team needs are here. I like the fact that the second round pick is early enough that I can just simply say whichever receiver falls that shouldn't, as kind of a cop out answer to try to project it that far. Um, if it is a rebuild, Seth Williams, or maybe everyone dislikes Bateman because he ran a little slow at number 8. I don't think he did, but the it's interesting watching the community look at stuff and go, "Oh, we love him, but we don't love him that much, and you guys are idiots for liking him that much." But oh, we dislike him, but you guys are idiots for thinking that you just hate him. Can I just look at a prospect and go, "All right, this guy's a 7, this guy's an 8, this guy's a 9, this guy's a 8." Um, Bateman would be someone who I'd be looking at the 1-8 selection though, as far as a 10 scale on these on the players.
He has DJ and AJ.
DJ Chark
Oh, it must
and
be AJ Brown.
AJ.
So he has
Okay,
DJ Chark, AJ Brown. Sean, what I would like to know what running backs you have.
I
Um,
don't know. Take Pitts at first all and best available receivers, then worry about running back next year.
well, so yeah, well for me it's okay. 101 for me would be clearly Jamar Chase. I would go Chase 101. I would then at 108 probably take either Rashad Bateman or Terrace Marshall, whoever's sitting there. And I would probably say whatever the best available tight end is at 201 because in a one QB with IDP involved, you could probably get either Fryermuth or Brevin Jordan there, and then you've at least loaded up on two talented wideouts. So Sean's saying, and the best running back is Dobbins, Moore, and Diggs. So I'm guessing.
Oh, this is probably a keeper league.
Well, he says full IDP dynasty, so I wasn't thinking
It does.
keeper league. But if you've got guys like that
Oh, he
available,
has Dobbins. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So the
I thought they meant he was a draftable asset. I'm like, oh, what?
no, I think he has Chark, AJ Brown, he has Dobbins, Moore, and Diggs. Would be my guess. If you're loaded up at receiver, then at 101 I'm going running back. No, well I guess it depends on what you got at tight end. So if you don't have a tight end, I would go Kyle Pitts at 1, and then turn around at 8 and pick whatever best running back is available. Whether it's Williams, Kenneth Gainwell, pick your running back.
Williams ain't gonna make it to 8 in a non-super flex.
Eh,
I would take one of Chase or Pitts number 1. Do end up taking the same position, like let's say you go receiver, then the 2-1 becomes trade bait. If you take Pitts, then you're resigning yourself to 8 being a receiver, with the upside of Javonte. It's not going to happen, but I've seen dumber things.
Well, but think about it. I
And then
mean, think about it. Some of these guys could fall if they land in a position like. So think about like CEH jumped over everybody because he went to Kansas City. So he immediately started moving up boards insanely high. Where a guy like Dobbins fell a little bit because he had multiple running backs there. You know, Ingram, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, like all these running backs were there. So people started to get a little nervous about him and DeAndre Swift. Well, now all of a sudden, 1 year later, those guys are both clearly perfectly fine, and there's nothing to worry about because there's just nothing ahead of them. You know, so it wouldn't surprise me if one of the top running backs, whether it's ETN, Williams, Carter, Gainwell, slides a little bit just because people are perceived that landing spot is bleh. He says his tight ends are Gronk, OJ Howard, and Disley. So I'm definitely grabbing a tight end with one of those three picks.
yeah, maybe go Pitts the BP receiver, and depending on the scoring format, Parsons.
Yeah, it'll make people go. It'll make people look second guess at you if you take Pitts at one, but you're then locking up. If you have all these other pieces at wide receiver, you've then locked up what'll be a tight end one very soon, as well as another nice depth wide receiver, or unless one of these running back slides. If a running back that's nice slides, then take them, and then at 201, take the best IDP option out there. I love that draft haul. I mean, if I'm getting that in a draft, I'm perfectly happy.
You just have to basically, if you're drafting first, which you have to commit on. It's not going to flip in 1 year.
Well, and you can see that he's doing that now. I mean, he's got a solid core of younger pieces.
Yeah.
And then he's got some age at tight end that he just needs to replace. I mean, OJ Howard, I love OJ Howard, but I would love for him to
I
get
love
out of
OJ
there.
Howard, but as long as Arians is on the sideline, it's kind of like, trade me, please.
Yep. Oh yeah, he says we can start up to 5 wide receivers with the flex position. So I wouldn't be afraid at all to take a wide receiver at 1.8 if that's what the best player is there.
Yeah, then go Pitts, BPA receiver, BPA receiver. Move on.
Yeah. I mean, depending on what your IDP looks like, I don't hate the Micah Parsons at 201. I mean, it's probably 5
I'd want to see
spots earlier,
first, but
I was thinking mid-second is where he really would start coming off, but I don't hate it if you take him early if you get your guy.
Yeah, that's a scoring issue.
For sure.
I can see him being 5th or 6th overall if the scoring sign off.
Could be. Yeah, I wouldn't argue that. But must have 2 running back and 2 wide receiver with 3 flex. Yeah. So
receiver.
Yeah, I would still take, and I wouldn't be afraid to take Pitts at the 1. But Jamar Chase is easily my 1-1 in a 1 QB. And then so you have 2 options. You have 2 options, Sean, in our mind. You either go Pitts Chase at 1. Pitts Chase. That's funny. I didn't think about it that way. Pitts Chase at 1, BPA at 8, and IDP at 2-1, or you flip the pick. Or you could go, Pitts, BPA, which would be a running back wide receiver, and then Parsons at 201. I think either one of those you come away a winner and you continue to build your strong roster.
Yeah.
He says he doesn't think he can make himself take Pitts at 101. And that's a tough thing is that
join the club.
You're going to see people that take him in the rest of the leagues and be like, "Whoa, how are you taking a tight end at 101?" Generational talent. It doesn't matter what position he's at. I mean, This kid is off the charts. I mean, I know it's ridiculous to think about it, but people were making Megatron comps to him. They were showing their stats and size and speed and all that stuff next to each other. I mean,
yeah.
But it's not wrong.
If you're in a rebuild situation, I'm looking for number 1. Who is going to help me most not the first, and the first year is just out. The second thing, if my roster is selecting first because I earned it, I kind of want the floor, and I'll be more concerned about the ceiling after the fact. AKA, I do feel that Pitts is solid enough that I'm fine selecting him first and just moving on. If I don't end up with the most chips out of it in the future, well, that I wind up with, enough of them. If that happened, all right, make the pick. I mean, it'd be like looking in hindsight and being like, oh, I should have moved to 1-9 and took Jefferson. All right, well, if you took CD at 1-4, are you really angry, or are you just upset that you didn't play the hand perfectly?
Yeah.
I mean, don't be mad at a winning hand.
And if you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. I mean, this is your team. So if you're not
Yeah.
comfortable taking, the most elite athlete in the draft class, then you go Chase, who is a very, very, very safe and sturdy wide receiver one. And you watched him at his pro day. He's got all the moves you could ask for. He can do everything on the field. He can catch every ball thrown his way. You go there and you're happy with it. I would tell you not to take a running back at the 101 if you're still rebuilding, because that running back isn't really going to do you much good. If you're really sold on taking a running back with one of your 3 picks, I would lean more to the 108 spot if somebody falls. If not, then I wouldn't touch it. I would just keep taking best player available.
I like Sermon enough at 2-1, almost like I felt about Zach Moss. I don't love him, but I like him enough to take him early second and just hope he's my RB2 for a couple years.
And you could. I don't hate the Sermon
and
pick.
and you're reaching for it at a lower cost than selecting him first overall, where that's a lot of cost.
Yeah, I think in the early second round, there's 3 running backs that I like enough that I would be willing to take somewhere in the 2-1 to 2-5-6 range. And that would be Trey Sermon, Kylan Hill, and Jarrett Patterson. Like, those are 3 running backs I like a lot that I would like to get a piece of in fantasy. Should I try to trade the 201 and the 18 up to try to catch Pitts?
No,
I don't.
I can't see the person who selects second or third accepting that.
Yeah,
is more my answer. Versus just being like,
well,
no.
but see, in a 1 QB, you got to think the running backs are going to be up at the top. Like, the running backs always go high in 1 quarterback leagues, at least from what I've experienced. So you're probably, if in all honesty, you could probably move up to 1-4 or 1-5 and get them. But I don't know that I'd want, in this draft with as many options as there are.
Ask us April 30th is the short answer to that. I don't know when they actually have the draft, but ask us April 30th.
April 29th is the first round. I expect Pitts to be drafted in the first hour of the draft. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Yeah. He's a top 10
If
pick.
you want that specific of an answer, ask me May 1st.
Yeah,
Before then, I hope, best answer I can give you. I hope that some of the players we mentioned for the rest of the show make it in the first round.
Well, and with it being a 12-team league, I mean, I would almost rather keep those 2 picks just because I feel like you're spending a lot to move up 3, maybe 4 spots. Like, if you could get away with moving the 108 and something that isn't so close, if you had something in the later second round, then, but moving up just a couple spots with 2-1, 2, like, I would just keep it and take a shot.
I'd be fine with it because you do get elite talent out of it. I know the argument for you think you can get more, but you're going to get more known with it also. If he's available at 4 or 5, I find it hard to have the owner of that selection be like, oh, well, I want 1, 6, or 7 and a third. He's going to be like, all right, Pitts is available, but pay me.
Yeah, if you can come away with two elite players like Chase and Pitts, I would do the trade. Your team's rebuilding, so it doesn't
Yeah,
hurt. That just means that you'll probably still have an earlier first next year potentially. So it's not really that, it's not a bad move. Sean, if you can get that to happen, I would be perfectly happy with it. Um, for me, I like having lots of draft picks in every draft because you never know where the value lies, and in some of those later picks, you might be able to get some good stuff from it. But if you can get them, I would do it. For me, it's hard to see owners coming off because he's such an elite player. If he's available for somebody at 1-4, 1-5, 1-6, I don't know that they'll come off the player because Pitts is. I mean, I know Sean had mentioned a little earlier in the chat that Gronk was the best tight end in fantasy, and he never got as high as what people are talking about Pitts when it comes to draft potential. But when he was coming out, he also went to a team that they also drafted Aaron Hernandez at the same time, so people really weren't sure what to make of that. Not many offenses were deploying two tight ends and making them fantasy relevant. So I have no doubt that Gronk was definitely not being considered as a top 5 overall rookie prospect in one QB because he may have been the first tight end they drafted, but they drafted two very athletic tight ends in the same draft.
it's going to be a weekly thing. That we get a one per show out of you.
I know.
Boy, I can
I
hope
know.
so.
That was my April Fool's one per show for Craig. All right, so yeah, so this was I hope that helped. That was a deeper conversation. But make sure, Sean, you can hit up Discord, you can hit up Facebook community. We can keep this conversation going as you get closer to your rookie draft. Don't just take our opinions. Talk to the community. We got plenty of guys on the team that will gladly help as well. You can message us as well. So I want to get a few more Devy guys in to talk about because there's some wide receivers. I want to name off like 3 wide receivers and like 2 or 3 tight ends. So I'm going to rapid fire them out. I'm going to throw them out there and see if any of them stick for you, guys that you have thought about or interested in. From the wide receiver position, kid from Indiana, Ty Freifogel. He was catching everything that Penix was throwing his way and showed a lot of really good moves when I wasn't expecting it. Khalil Shakir from Boise State and Jakari Roberson from Wake Forest. Guys that are kind of under the radar, I think, but that have all shown pretty well that I think they could be interesting type guys in the next draft or two, depending on when they come out. Yeah.
I don't think I looked at the Indiana receiver. I don't have him on my list here.
He was arguably the best target in the passing game.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I mean, I think I saw someone who put like a 6-round draft in, and I hit everyone in the top 6 rounds. But beyond that, I need to mentally take a little bit off just to not be looking at fantasy football all the time. Khalil Shakir, where are my notes on him? Oh, I think he ultimately goes up in the 2nd round next year of the rookie draft. He reminds me of who is the guy that San Francisco drafted in the 2nd round out of Boise that people were high on that I wasn't. He got released and now he's on
Oh,
the
Pettis, Dante
Giants.
Pettis. Yeah.
Pettis,
Yeah, it
Washington, not
wasn't. No,
Boise.
he was Washington.
And I don't mean to sit here and say, hey, I think he misses, but he's a flanker slot only receiver who kind of has it, but he doesn't have anything that you really look at and go, this is why you're in the NFL. But he doesn't have anything that you say, well, you're out of the NFL because you don't have this. I think he goes late second day next year of the actual draft. I like him, don't love him. And who is the third name?
Jakari Roberson from Wake Forest. He's a little under the radar as well.
Just scanning my
Yeah, that's
notes
fine.
here.
Take your time.
I hit a Michigan receiver before I hit a Wake Forest one. Not all. Oh, I did hit him. If he's gonna hold, I have that I like him, but he needs more size at having the same speed. I wrote that he is more of a keep an eye on versus make the selection and feel solid about it, which from what you're saying is, under the radar. There's 100 of those every year.
I like that he was a big
But
play
yes, I
threat
did
in
look
the
at him.
ACC. I think he averaged something like 14 or 15 yards per catch, and it wasn't like he only had a small amount. I think he had like 60 or 70 catches last year. So he was a kid that I was like, okay, he showed some things, especially in the ACC. It's not elite talent every week, but pretty good talent. So he was one I think of them. I think he's probably the most intriguing to me, and he'll probably wind up being on a Devy roster or two of mine before too long. And then, yeah, so those were the three wide receivers. And then Eric Gilbert, obviously was a big name tight end, but he's a tight end without a home right now. So I think he's a guy that you could target for cheap and really get a return because he's probably the best tight end in college right now. You don't think he's
If anyone's selling him cheap because he's in the portal, I'd be floored.
well, because he hasn't
He
picked a home
he
yet.
was what, like the 5th overall prospect last year, and he went on the field for LSU, who, well, they sucked. Not their own fault. They had other issues, but there he showed the upside, and it was rather obvious upside. If anyone's selling because he doesn't have a home right now, okay, I want to see it.
Well, I imagine with him still looking for a place to go, maybe now is the time to try to see if anybody is willing to sell. Not saying that's possible, but when I'm thinking of guys to target that there's some sort of thing going on, injury, transfer portal, those are all things that sometimes people ding and have concerns about. So Eric Gilbert is a guy I would see if what the owner's looking for, if he's even willing to move him, that kind of thing, because he's still the best tight end in college right now with all the guys that came out this year. In my mind, he's arguably the best tight end in college right now, even though he's not on a team.
As much as I do like Jordan,
Right.
if you did a combo, and I could taxi him and didn't have to hold an actual roster spot, he'd be my tight end 2. And I know that there's going to be he only played for 1 year. Like, yes, I do realize that he's not physically ready for, say, Khalil Mack off the edge when he would be blocking, but he would be my second tight end if he was in the draft.
There you go.
If I at least had somewhat of a physical mulligan to hold him over. However, we're going to say that.
Who are you looking at? Who are some guys that you're interested in?
He does have his selected as a receiver downside, but Jaleel Billingsley I really liked. He's just a height, weight, speed freak. He's one of those. Yeah, he signed with Bama because, well, he signed there and Saban saw what everyone else saw and he selected Nick Saban and that's the end of it. But just height, weight, speed freak. He didn't have exceptions, but look out. If the offense ever switches and they throw the football there, clear upside.
If that's That's a big if. Yeah, no, I was just looking up my information on him. Looks like he could be a big play threat. Love the size, love the athletic profile. Yeah, I mean it. Then at the end of my notes, I wish he would have gone almost anywhere else. So it shows how much I
Yeah,
love
I mean,
how
I'm a
Alabama uses their tight ends.
yeah, I mean, I'm a talent over situation truther, and it Mayor, but we've hit on him in other episodes, and I'm sure
Oh
we'll hit on
yeah.
him again in the future. Not to just be like, yeah, get off the show, but we've hit him before.
Yeah, Michael Mayer is definitely a target. There's one other tight end that I'm really interested in that is in the same mold as Billingsley, but he actually was a wide receiver when he got to college. He added about 20 pounds and converted to tight end, but was still the best receiver on the team. And it's a kid named Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina. He was recruited as a wide receiver, came in, was pretty solid for the most part from what I've noticed, and then they converted him to tight end. He added 20 pounds, was just as fast, just as good a receiver. So a guy that I'm interested in keeping tabs on. I'm not sure I will roster him at this point because I don't have any tight end premium leagues, but I'm definitely interested in keeping tabs on him because he could be somebody that, with the weak classes that are coming up over the next couple of years, he could be a guy that could push for some consideration.
It's amazing how some of the schools, and you look at it and go, okay, the non P5. Let's say that there's 100 of them. I mean, I know that there's more, but let's go ahead and say it's 100 schools. It's interesting how you have one school that ends up with like three of the top 100 NFL selections, and you look at it and go, how did this happen on a mathematical like perspective? How did they all end up here? And it's got to be coaching, and it's got to be just an eye for scouting on some of them. I haven't watched him, but I did watch enough McCall that you saw that the receivers were not
Mm-hmm.
horrible. So,
There you go.
but yes, I mean, I didn't specifically watch him, but there were receivers open when he threw the ball.
Yeah. Yep. Coastal Carolina is a very small school, um, but there's some potential there. We do have one question to wrap up the show. I want to get to more NFL draft focused or rookie draft focused, I should say. Uh, we do a 5 round rookie draft. Any suggestion for late round potential UDFAs, something to target later in their draft? Um, Obviously, this is pre draft as well. Is there anybody that you think
Yeah.
that they could get late that might be an interesting guy to target?
I don't have my rookie notes up, which means I have to then scour my Google Sheets on the phone. Um, I'll just head with well, now there's lots of receivers and there's lots of them that people like. I'll go running back. Kylan Hill's not a sleeper. Um,
Nope.
Zamir White went back to school. All right, I don't have anyone with a higher than 3 athletes score. Michael Carter's pretty known at this point. Um,
I wouldn't mind throwing a shot on like Tutu Atwell from Louisville. He's a smaller guy, but he's pretty dynamic. Uh, and he's probably not a name that's going to go, early. He's probably later in rookie drafts. Rakim Boyd from Arkansas, the running back. I like that he's more of a big power back, but he's a guy that could
yes.
slip down. Shee Smith from South Carolina, another smaller wide receiver, but he could be a nice slot receiver. I'm just trying to look through names of who I think might actually fall that far. I mean, that's the toughest thing right now.
If I if I'm in round 4 or 5, I'm gonna look for a position that I think I can get 10 seasons out of. Which I know that sounds odd, but I'm gonna look for like the Ian Books. I'm gonna look for who's the other? Shane Buechele, because if they get into a situation that they're gonna have somebody's job, they might have it for a long time, and you don't have to worry about that position. As much as I hated Jordan Love, if you were in round 4 last year and you didn't know who to make the selection on, it it is horrible if you draft early and you go, okay, who is the first wide receiver? That's that was my pick. All right, you took Henry Ruggs at 3rd overall. Eventually you start making it far enough, I start making the switch to maybe I was wrong. Who's the best or who's the top drafted receiver that was selected who is out there still? Is there a first round or early second round back? As much as we want to hate on Drew Lock, if you drafted him in the 4th or 5th, money. Just who's the top available that wasn't selected before?
Yeah, Cody in the chat mentions Elijah Mitchell from Louisiana. There. So this is the tougher thing.
Was
Is
he a
no, he's a
receiver?
running back. The tougher thing in this conversation, Sean, is trying to determine, because once we get to the draft, if a surprise name goes at the end of day 3, early day 4, they'll shoot up the draft board. And some of these guys have something that really could propel them. Even like an Amari Rogers, they were running him as a running back and doing a lot of things at his pro day that teams I think are really going to be intrigued by. So let's say Amari Rogers goes round 3 to somebody because they see the gadgety player. Well, he shoots up your rookie draft when he really probably should be a late 3rd, 4th round pick, I would guess, even now. Another name I would throw that for consideration at the back of your draft would be Demetric Felton from UCLA, running back. He is a guy that he's very Josh Kelly-esque, that you could do a lot of things with him, and he really shouldn't be nearly as expensive as Josh Kelly was. I think Kelly was a mid-second round pick last year. Felton should be a lot cheaper, but have very similar skill set. Yes, I'm sorry. Mitchell is Louisiana Tech, not just Louisiana. I forgot the Tech part of it. Thank you, Cody. Um,
Yeah, I somewhat liked him, but if he's going to be free, yeah,
yeah,
sure.
I mean, these late round guys, absolutely, absolutely willing to take a chance on some of these guys late round and see what happens. Because these are taxi squad guys, these are backup roster guys. Come to season, if things aren't looking good for them, you can flip them, you can drop them, and it's not a big loss. So those would be some names I would consider. I'd even throw Ramondre Stevenson from Oklahoma in there, running back. You kind of could see he's a big back, strong, a little plus speed. He's got a little wiggle to his game. I would be willing to take a chance on him. Uh,
If we're looking at the bigger running back who's going to be free, and yes, I'm going to test and see who's watching the show. It would be name slipped me there. It would be Master Teague, because I don't think he gets selected. We'll see who's watching the show and see if I get hate mail on that one. But no, I don't think he's ultimately selected in the draft.
So there you go. There's some options, and continue to follow along not only in the channel but in the different communities we've got. The Discord community is free to join. It's over if you go to rotoheat.com, you can find it. Our Facebook community obviously is free to join. It's oh, I guess I was right. Oh, Cody, you know what? It's all right. We were both right. Louisiana Tech, same state, no big deal.
It's not LSU. It doesn't matter.
Right. So check out the different communities. We are going to continue to put content out, getting ready for the draft. Once we get, we've got ADP that's going up on the site for our patrons. So make sure you jump on there, become a patron. We do appreciate that, and you'll be able to get ADP. You can see who's drafting them where, so you know where to draft these guys at. We've got a lot of tools, a lot of stuff out there for you to use to help your teams get better, help you do well in your rookie drafts. We're here to help. We want to make sure that you guys get as good quality information and lots of different opinions as possible. There's a lot of guys on the RotoHeat team. Our evaluators from RookieDraftGuide.com. We've got, double-digit amount of guys helping put this content together to make sure you guys are getting plenty of opinions. It's not just Paul. It's not just me. It's the collective. We've got a whole thing going on for you Star Trek guys. It's the Borg. We've assimilated a lot of people onto the team. So we're trying to give you as good information as possible and as nicely as possible. We like to have fun and we rib each other, but RotoHeat's a community full of people that are not jerks to each other. And if you do break rule number 1, we hammer you right out of here. So, we thank you guys always for sticking around. Remember, next week we are off because I will be on vacation, except on Tuesday night. Rick, our fearless leader, the founder of RotoHeat, the man, the myth, the Cubs fan, he will be leading our Tuesday night Dynasty show, and they're going to have a special guest. So make sure you tune in at 9:30. But then the week after, we're back. We're going hard. We're working up to the NFL draft. We are going to be live streaming for the draft, and probably in its entirety like we did last year. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, hit the notification icon, all the things that you normally do. We love you guys. We thank you for hanging out with us. If you're watching live, you're the best. And if you're not watching live, you're also the best. We do appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys next time.